this is Coffee with the Summerland Kids. Currently it's 67 in Summerland with a high of, what's the high, Aaron? 76?
The high is going to be 75 in Summerland today.
75 in Summerland. Nice. That's amazing. God, another June day. It's Tuesday out here, 2024. I'm in Colorado outside. It's going to be warm today. It feels warm already. It's like, it might be 80 degrees out here today.
Oh, that's nice.
Yeah, no, for sure. So we've been going to the river and hitting that up, realizing there's a little bit of mosquitoes down there. So it's like, it's the old school time for like the camping bug spray style, just to like take the edge off, maybe,
Yeah, get some of those citronella candles or some citronella oil. That seems to help deter them.
For sure. And then up where I'm at the cabin, it's not so bad as far as the what's it called? The bug issue is not as bad, but those things bite, man. You feel it when they get you,
Yeah, we get some mosquitoes up here. It wasn't so bad this year. I think that the streets department, they come around and spray, and they, make sure that all the drainage ditches are cleared out, because sometimes they don't clear out. And
oh, that's right.
So there's standing water.
Yeah, the standing water issue. That's the major thing, huh?
Yeah.
I used to live down by the LA River in the Arts District, and I don't really recall any real bug problem down there, surprisingly. I mean, but that river was always pretty much flowing pretty rapidly, fairly rapidly down the way. So, yeah. But
yeah, that's interesting. How it's all concreted in.
Yeah, and there's a cool guy, Lewis McAdams, like adopted the river and did a project up the river a bit. It's called Frogtown, and it's basically he added let the trees come back in the center of the river and created more of like a real river-like vibe and real river-like feeling with some trees and then the habitat and the birds come back, and so it really sort of rejuvenated the vibe of like how you would imagine a river to feel, because like in the movies Grease, and I just saw one the other day where they drove a car down into the river for a moment. There's always those classic Hollywood films, like I think Terminator 2 had a feature of the river in it, and of course Repo Man. But anyways, that concrete river is pretty intense to look at. It's really like, was the Army Corps of Engineers, I think, built it, because in the 1930s there was a giant flood that happened, and after that they decided, we need to really shore up this river and make it so it doesn't happen again as far as flooding.
Yeah, I guess there's a few little dams along the river that are there for basically flood control.
Yeah,
along the way.
Yeah,
I like the river up here because there's wildlife preserves all along the river on the Feather River here.
That's awesome.
So there's a bunch of little areas.
That's cool. Yeah, up here the wildlife it's amazing. I mean, I see deer every single day pretty much on our property, especially because we put out a couple salt licks, like a block of salt for them. You can get the salt licks at Tractor Supply, and it's a classic, old school country style where they love to lick that salt, the deers.
well, they need it. They need those minerals and stuff to be healthy. And I guess it's a little bit scarce out there in the wilderness. So when they got a regular source for it, they remember where it's at and they come back.
Yeah, definitely. And we have, multi-generational, don't see a whole lot of big bucks, but definitely the younger buck are there, the little deers with little horns, and then of course the females no horns, but they're abundant. They're definitely abundant. I've seen this year, I believe I saw elk a couple times already coming through, not necessarily on our property, but very close to our property. So my mom saw a bear the other morning. So it's definitely the country, I would say, for sure, without a doubt.
Elks are a lot bigger though, right?
Mm-hmm.
Than like a deer. They're a lot bigger.
Yeah, they're a lot bigger for sure. They're
not like
level.
moose level big, but definitely bigger.
You're right. You're right. Not moose level, but definitely bigger for sure. And they look distinctly different. And you just got to be super cautious on the roads because um, either elk or deer, they'll just run out randomly across the road. So I always try to like sort of chill drive because there's a few little turns on the highway where you can't see around the next corner. So you got to be aware, and you always see them. They get hit on those blind corners more or less. People just drive like there is no care in the world, and they're the only person on the highway, but you don't realize it. But there's animals out there, so
You
yeah.
got the deer whistles on your truck there? Because I know the deer
No,
whistles
I
give a
know.
good
I
warning for them.
I think we used to have a car with them on. I should go that route again. I think that's a good idea, just to like you know put at least a little precautionary measure on the whole situation. You know, and there's porcupines for sure, and then there's like I think there's some marmots. I should try to be like out here when you're living in the country. It's like having your phone with the camera ready at all times because you never know what new little animal is going to pop out for
Yeah,
for a photo shoot.
no, that's true. It's been a while since I've been out in the country. I came off the hill maybe 4 years ago and moved into town. And then we moved up here. It's amazing. I've been here a little over a year up in Orville.
Yeah,
And there's just so many wilderness and wildlife areas. The lake, the river. It's just an abundant supply of water. So obviously, all the little critters and bugs and things like that are drawn to the water. There's definitely a lot of good fishing.
yeah,
Um,
that's cool.
something interesting, I didn't realize that there's like a forebay and an afterbay. So the river, they divert part of it over to this forebay, and then the forebay kind of goes into these canals. There's like rice paddy fields, so it's interesting because you'll be driving along and you're at water level, and then you'll go down below the water level because there's like levees along the roads,
Oh wow.
and then you'll drive over like canal looking things where you can tell they're going into irrigation, and that's right below the road right now. I guess maybe it's because the river's full. I guess it lowers during the summer, I would imagine.
Yeah. Huh. Yeah,
I
you
didn't
guys.
really get out too much the first year because settling into the house and everything.
Yeah, I know. I found myself going out more, of course, since I have my buddy Jason visiting, making much more of an effort, like to go down to the river, which is just like 4 miles down the road from where I'm at. The river's right there, and so it's super. It's beautiful. The Blanco River, and then of course we have the San Juan River, which is in town. But both those places are cool to hang out. You just bring a beach chair, and just it's like you have your own little private beach. You know, the other day we realized though because we got a bunch of rain, we got like 4 inches of rain real quick. Um, the river had risen like at least a foot. So our little hangout spot was like all muddy. Um,
Oh yeah, yeah.
yeah.
So you're like
So
on the last little push with your friend Jabra.
yeah,
Um, you had him for a month, I guess, helping you get through the archiving and
yeah,
organizing and categorizing and sorting and
yeah,
protecting and
yeah.
archiving and all that.
Totally. Yeah, we've just been working like, 3 hours a day, 5 hours. Let's see, 5 days a week, 3 hours a day. So we start our day at 9 o'clock. We end at noon, and it's definitely like sit down and research. So we're looking up every single book, every single comic book, primarily like pulling it up on eBay real quick. And if it's not on eBay, I'll do a Google Lens search, and thankfully both those apps like eBay and Google Lens provide you with real quick references online from eBay sellers or Amazon sellers, or sometimes heritage auctions will have something up, and we'll just get a high and a low number just to have an idea of what we're looking at in terms of the cost or the price for resale on some of the comic books, just so we know that I mean, grandpa wasn't there is a couple. I want to say at least one Superman comic, but we don't have the holy grail of the like Superman #1 that's like $500,000. That's
Oh
not in
wow,
our
wow.
that's
So
not in our
are you doing that from your office, the sorting, or
yeah.
are you doing that up at the cabin?
We're doing it at the office now because it's a quicker internet connection. I mean, although today we're doing good today because I'm outside. But I just have a regular. I'm using our cell phones and using the cellular network for research on the online research, and it's a lot faster here than it is at the cabin. The cabin is a little slower in terms of the the Wi-Fi connectivity and speed. So it's like you pull it up, you take a picture using the eBay app, and it's so fast how quick it comes up. The references. Once in a while, you'll pull up a comic that won't be online currently, um, but there's usually if you dig a little deeper, you'll find it somewhere. But there may not be a price attached to it, but at least you've done the research, and that's the main thing when you're looking up old antiques and things like that, is to do the research and find out how old this thing is that you hold in your hand, you know.
Yeah, that's so interesting. How computers allow us to do that.
Yeah.
I was having some questions. I was thinking last night. I actually woke up in the middle of the night and had this question eating at me. Oh, what is it? What? And I thought, and I'm like, okay. And I got up in the middle of the night and it was like, had a cigarette, and I was like, oh, well, I'll just Google it. And I
Yeah,
Googled it and I got my answer. And
that's
I was like,
amazing.
okay. It's like, wow, technology. I could imagine back in the day that you had to go to a library or some school or find someone that had studied something so you can get specific information. It's not like now you can just go to Google and get any information practically you want.
I know, it's awesome. I mean, in the day, and I still have a couple. And I actually bought a couple myself because I just find them interesting. The comic book price guide. It's called the Overstreet Comic Book Price Guide, and they publish it yearly. It's an old fashioned book. They also have an amazing website that's a resource. But the Overstreet Price Guide essentially tells you the values of comic books, and it gives you like a rating system to for grading, and to tell you if you have a super nice copy, let's call it a 9.5, or if it's mint copy of a specific copy of, let's say Spider-Man, 1985 or something like that. You have a certain copy you want to look up. You can look it up on Overstreet Price Guide and see today's current market value, and that's important when collecting, of course, and when you're keeping a collection, to have some sort of idea of what the market's doing, I guess, in terms of the old stuff. And what I
Yeah,
found
well, that
is,
makes a lot of sense because
yeah,
if you have a comic book and you're able to say, oh, this is somewhere between 9.3 and 9.8, and it could be this much, um, why would you go spend 35 or $40 how much it is to get them graded if the comic book itself is only worth 50?
yeah,
And
there's that too. I mean,
because maybe you can sell it ungraded for 20.
yeah,
you know
it's you're very right on that one. It's there's some back and forth stuff, but one thing I've seen is, for example, some of the books that a lot of times I would call them good librarians or good stewards of books would, when you buy a book from a bookseller, oftentimes they'll use like a light pencil, and they'll write inside the front cover like their little price maybe. And so,
yeah,
sometimes you'll see it'll say $1 or 75 cents, but that was purchased um, 75 years ago for $1. And so now
yeah,
now it might be worth 75 bucks or something like that, or even 50 or 30, but still it's gone up significantly because, I think when they talk about comic books, especially because what, for I want to say a couple decades, comic books were at 10 cents a copy. So those 10-cent comics, oftentimes, I would say minimum $5, but then it goes up to like sometimes they're $17,000 in a best case scenario on a specific comic, of course, in terms of the grading. So it's important to know what you have, and that's really my goal with this is to know what we have, and I'm just enjoying the process and learning more about my grandfather, of course, and my great uncle Elmer, and how early how early he was on board with cartooning, because Elmer was born in 1898, and by the time I want to say 1920, I mean that guy was in his full tilt game of creating cartoons and working for the newspaper, and being that was his career, his chosen profession. There was a correspondence course, I think, that you could take, through the mail, that would like essentially teach you the basics of cartooning. And for some kids, young adults, they took it very seriously, because they could see that it was that every day everyone got the newspaper. Back in the day, the newspaper was like sort of like that was the internet, man. The
Yeah,
newspaper,
yeah. Any news stories, the weather, any
yeah,
local happenings, like
all that.
yesterday, the girlfriend's like, "Oh, it looks like there's a fire." She looked out the window and she could see some smoke moving along.
Uh-huh.
And I just looked on the internet, typed in, "Is there a fire near Orville?" And boom, it popped right up with the articles talking about there was a fire, but the firemen had got it under control.
Oh, good.
And so it's like instant information
Yeah,
versus you got to wait until the paper boy delivers your paper in the morning, and you're not getting that middle of the night news. You're getting yesterday's news in the newspaper today.
yeah,
Um,
for sure. You're right. And then those guys used to have deadlines, of course, to get that paper out every single day. And then of course the radio played a big part in life back in the day. But I think the young people of the early 20th century were very inspired by comics as a humorous sort of part of their day. And so the writers were, you know, sometimes incredible in terms of like keeping you entertained and adding something fun to your day. So it's almost
yeah,
like
I think that that's so awesome because you're getting the entertainment factor, but at the same time, now you're interested in reading. You got to read, all the comics to understand the storyline, and having something that's entertaining and engaging to get you motivated to read.
yeah,
That's going to bring the skill set of reading.
yeah, for sure. So that was definitely a cool part of it. That reading was just a part of it. I mean, I remember, like, of course, like Family Circle, when we were kids in the Sunday comics. Sometimes it was only one panel, and they only had just a little bit of words to say, but it didn't take much to make us smile and laugh and enjoy it. And of course, Snoopy and Peanuts and all those things from our
Don't forget
childhood.
Dennis the Menace.
Dennis the Menace, exactly, and Richie Rich and all those classics. I remember, going to the in Montecito, the front page when we were teenagers. Going to the magazine rack was definitely like part of our life. And then of course checking the comic book section. They sometimes had a little comic book section, and then of course in Santa Barbara, I think there was Metro Comics and Andromeda Bookshop and a couple of the bookstores, and then later on Borders Books came. So bookstores used to be a really much more substantial thing than they are nowadays. You know?
Yeah, and nowadays, well, I remember when Kindle, right? People had the little Kindle, and you could get the books on Kindle,
Yeah,
and Amazon publishing. It's so easy to write a book and publish it versus back in the day where you had to write your book and submit it to various publishers and hope and pray that they decide, oh yeah, let's go with this and publish this book, because back then there was a lot of investment. You had to obviously pay for the paper, pay for the ink, pay for the setup, and just to get your book in print. Now with WordPress or Word documents or documents on Google Docs. You can write it up on the computer, format it into a PDF or whatever format's required, and send it through the internet. And so those books that you write are now available without all that expense. I wrote a book some time ago and put it up on Amazon and decided, I'm going to order some. And so being able to write it and put it on Amazon was really cheap. Didn't cost me very much at all if it wasn't free, I believe. But in order to get the hard cover, the paperback hard copy print, I had to invest, a little bit of money for each book. I think it was maybe $4 per book, minimum of I think 10 or 20 that I ordered. So
that's cool.
It's just really neat how a creative writer or somebody can get their book out to Kindle or Amazon or any of these other platforms with just a few clicks of a button. I think that's really, really neat how technology allows that ideas to be shared.
Absolutely. I heard an actor recently working on either it was DC or Marvel, but he was able to access the entire Marvel library from their website. And because, he was given the privilege because he was going to be starring in one of their new films. So he basically had access to their whole comic book library, and it's all digital now. So, I remember years ago, Playboy had published their entire collection on a DVD slash interactive kind of a CD or something where you could go through and look at everything digitally. So they just hand you a tiny box, like Playboy from the very first edition up until maybe the 1990s or through 2000 or something. It was so all that someone had to literally go through page by page and scan every single page and then get it on up and online. Nowadays I think they're skipping some steps because the artists are working in digital to begin with, so they're working on like large drawing pads with like a digital pen and using that digital technology to create the art. So they're really, some of them are not even working on paper anymore, I believe. They're just straight up creating digitally. So when that digital page is finished, I guess it's like saving, of course, that file, and then that's page one, and and so forth. So they've skipped a step of
I wonder what some of the old artists back in the day before technology, would think about it. Maybe Picasso or Rembrandt.
Yeah.
As far as I'm able to access the computer and do my art on this. I wonder what they would think about that.
Yeah, because there's really, when you look at the screen, I was always blown away when I used to go to the drawing workshop at Jim Fittipaldi's place in LA on Tuesday nights. They'd have the figure drawing workshop, and some of the people were working on like an iPad type of situation, and they would they'd crank out an amazing rendering, but when you close the iBook or close your computer, you can't see it anymore. You'd literally have to go make a print, and then you're up against the challenge of high grade printing and the cost of color printing and a real quality format. So there's definitely something to be said for the all digital approach, because like you said, it enables a quick publication, quick sharing of imagery to many people for low cost. So there's that aspect of things which is amazing. So
Yeah, and I'm like, it doesn't always translate. It looks good on a computer, but then you try and print it on a shirt or print it on a poster or print it in a book, and maybe it doesn't quite give the same aesthetic or the same feel or even the same look. Um, so I imagine there's a certain learning curve as far as what looks good on the computer and you know able to what's able to do once you have it
yeah,
on the computer, and how does that translate? Because if you're not familiar with how it translates from computer to paper, you might think, oh, this is an awesome art and print it out, and maybe it doesn't translate like you're saying. Maybe it doesn't get the colors you wanted, or the vividness, or the line pixelations. I know sometimes when you blow picture up, you get the pixelations. So that's all different skills, still art though.
No, for sure. It's like the what do you say, the fine artists in some cases have transferred over to almost like a commercial art. The mediums, the tools they're using are definitely like commercial art driven tools, I want to say. But it's sort of almost become one within the industry. Um, and there still is an element of artistry and craftsmanship to translate someone's image, because some painters are working in traditional oils and acrylics to create paintings, but then when they have that painting photographed and translated over to a poster, let's say, that's another challenge to translate all those colors into looking exactly like the original. So they might, it's definitely trial and error, and thanks to some certain printing companies, they've sort of mastered that technique of doing that. And I imagine the digital files are fairly big, especially when you're talking about really beautiful fine art print. So it's somewhat costly, I want to say, to create digital prints on a large format.
Yeah, I know that like you go to these print shops and some of them will have like banner printing. And
Mm-hmm.
I know that you did, some displays where some pretty big pieces where you had to set up and, to be able to translate from that, like you take the pictures and put it on your Instagram. But as far as, if you wanted to reproduce that, you couldn't. And I think that creates a certain value too. Like, I mean, if you have the
Yeah.
digital image and you can print out a certain number, I mean, even artists would do that, um, where they'd have limited prints, one of 100 or one of 50, and that's all they're going to print. I think back, my mom, me and her went to Las Vegas before she passed, and she had found a Rembrandt print, and so they would carve out the prints and then use that same print, and the quality of the print, after so many prints would degrade a little bit. And so that's something that, I guess when you're in a digital format, you don't have to worry about, but that takes away some of the aesthetic value of it, I think.
Yeah, and then holding on to those files, and then as computers get better and better, those old files just fall away into our personal archives. So it's definitely interesting how, I mean, I still have files left over from back in the day, elementary school, high school, the art I made after high school, like college. I have some of that, and but I don't have any digital. I did have a photographer at one point shoot some of my work, and I have transparencies of that. So theoretically, transparencies, I believe, like negatives, but they start to degrade over time too. So I guess no matter what medium you're working in, preservation is kind of key to it, and keeping your your archive or your portfolio current, and in some cases being able to send a your newer work, if you will, or a representation of some of your work to somebody is not always the easiest thing as an artist. You got to be pretty on top of your game, I want to say, um, using technology to be able to quickly send someone 10 images of your work. You have to be you have to be very prepared to send a good presentable format to someone, and then have them be able to, of course, open it, look at it, and have the same experience you're having with it. So that's a challenge.
Yeah, it's interesting. It's cool because I'm looking at our podcast here, and I imagine eventually we'll get a bit better and better quality or whatever, and
Yeah.
just to have that like on a YouTube or a Facebook where we can look back on it. I think
Yeah,
that's pretty cool, being
I
able
know.
to.
I'm with you on that. Definitely the same vibe, because when we get it out there to YouTube, it'll be sort of a cool thing to look back on. This is episode 57. We're Coffee with the Summerland Kids, and we're cranking out the episode. So it's definitely, we're making a statement as artists just coming on 5 days a week and presenting ourselves and just talking about what top comes off the top of our head, you know. So here we are.
Yeah, it's pretty cool, you know. I mean, just to have that consistency.
Yeah,
Um, every Monday
absolutely.
I look forward to it. Every Friday I'm like, oh, it's going to be a couple days, but
I know,
we're
right?
at that time, Jericho.
Yeah,
30 minutes is up.
yeah. Cheers, man. Thanks for joining us. You know, the coffee with the Summerland kids. Here we are. It's a Tuesday. We're gonna break hump day tomorrow. Thank goodness. We're cranking out another work week. So here we are.
All right, brother. We'll see you tomorrow.
See you tomorrow.